Racism exposed. 12 seconds after attack, cops discover the incredible truth about Navy officer James Parker. A proud Navy officer, was beloved in his suburban community near Norfolk, Virginia. A 32-year-old man devoted to protecting the values of freedom and justice, he embodied the very essence of American resilience. Raised by his single mother, Ellen, a respected school principal and a pillar of their town, he always carried her lessons of kindness in his heart. That summer evening had a warm glow, the sun gently slipping below the horizon, casting a golden light over the neighborhood, creating an illusion of peace that would shatter within moments. Just outside his home, everything changed. A group of masked individuals, fueled by a misconceived notion of anger and division, ambushed him mercilessly. They viewed him not as a man but as a misguided target, their fists driven by a fire that wasn't aimed at him but rather at a phantom of hatred they believed he represented. The violence was brutal, and James lay on the ground, the light in his eyes dimming, as chaos unfurled. News spread like wildfire. The narrative twisted and morphed, with some portraying James as a suspect in a hate crime, a victim turned villain. Others staunchly defended him, rallying under the banner of truth and justice. That in the storm of half-truths, Ellen became a fierce warrior for her son's honor. She was a lioness, fear gnawing at her heart while fire ignited her voice. Every day, she stood before the community, urging them to seek justice rather than succumb to prejudice. But every night, as she rested her head to sleep, she worried about James. He's out there serving our country, and those who don't know him will destroy him with misconceptions, she would whisper into the quiet. Amidst the community's turmoil, a glimmer of hope emerged, a 12-second surveillance clip. Footage that promised to unveil the truth and potentially mend the fractures being formed. As people gathered around their screens, murmurs ricocheted through the crowd. Would this video be the salvation James needed? The anticipation gripped everyone. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the pivotal community rally approached, tensions bubbled, and whispers threaded through the air like smoke. James felt the weight of collective judgment on his shoulders, but he also felt the flicker of hope fueled by those who stood beside him. Then came a phone call. His estranged brother, Michael, announced he was coming home. Their past was a tangle of misunderstandings, but perhaps this was the moment for reconciliation. The rally became a tapestry of passionate voices, woven together by the desire for truth. Families with homemade signs filled the streets, their whispers rising in volume, reflecting both fear and unwavering support. The moment James stood before the mic, the crowd hushed, anticipation electric. Just as he began to speak, a shadow passed overhead, tension escalated, and a singular question hovered in the air: could the bonds of brotherhood mend a chasm wider than they had imagined? The night felt impossibly thick, heavy with the weight of secrets yet to be unveiled. Would justice prevail, or would their past continue to darken their future? The air crackled with intensity as James gripped the microphone. He felt the collective heartbeat of the crowd, a pulsating rhythm that mirrored his own anxious pounding. Faces from his childhood surrounded him: neighbors, teachers, old friends, and even people he hadn't met before. They were all here, and the stakes had never felt higher. Would they see him for who he was, or would they only see the narrative that had twisted around him? Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight, he began, his voice steady yet trembling with emotion. I know you've heard so many stories, so many rumors about what happened that night. But I stand here, not just as a Navy officer. I'm a son, a brother, and your neighbor. He paused, swallowing the lump in his throat. Ellen stood off to the side, tears glistening in her eyes. This was a monumental moment for both of them. I was attacked brutally. The gasp from the crowd was audible, a collective intake of breath. But the truth is, I don't want to talk about the attackers. I want to talk about healing. We need to come together to fight the real enemy, ignorance. His words hung in the warm evening air, the weight of them settling deep at the hearts of those listening. From the sidelines, he caught sight of Michael, his brother, walking through the throng and approaching the stage. Anger and sorrow warred on his face, a storm building in his eyes. The estrangement between them dissolved in that moment, replaced by an understanding deeper than words could convey. As Michael reached him, James felt a sudden wave of emotion washing over him. Then, a loud voice broke through the crowd. "You don't belong here, Parker." A figure at the back, cloaked in shadows, sneered. Tension escalated, the crowd shifting uncomfortably, some stepping back, concern rippling through the assembly. James's heart raced. "Please," he urged, trying to maintain control. "Let us not be divided by hate. We can't let anger dictate who we are. You may not agree with my narrative, but please hear me out." Suddenly, the cameras turned, focusing on the back of the crowd. The footage from the surveillance clip loomed large in everyone's mind. James took a deep breath, feeling the gravity of the moment. "I know there are videos that don't show the whole story. But I promise you, I will fight for my truth to be heard." The microphone squeaked as he adjusted it, desperate to keep the attention on himself and away from the disruption. The crowd's murmurs climbed to a crescendo, filled with a mix of fear, support, and confusion. Yet hope flickered in the air, like a beacon guiding them through the darkness, and then, a voice spoke from the depths of the crowd, booming and authoritative. "Get out of here." A large man stepped forward, seemingly determined to guard James from the chaos. It felt surreal, an unwritten chapter unfurling right before their eyes. James turned. "Can we stop? This isn't about division, it's about togetherness." His voice rang out, resolute, but just as he thought he had a grip on the surge of emotions, Michael stepped up, 2 steps away. "James, maybe it's time to reveal what really happened that night." The crowd paused, anticipation thick in the air. What truth was Michael about to deliver that could change the course of everything? As James's heart raced, the silence screamed louder than any protests, pulling at the intensity of the moment. What secrets lay in that divided past, waiting to leap into the light? James steadied himself, suddenly acutely aware of the weight of Michael's words. Whatever happened next could shift the entire atmosphere. He searched his brother's eyes, looking for some sign of reassurance. Was this the moment Michael had been waiting for, or would it deepen their rift even further? "James," Michael began, his voice low but charged with urgency. "This isn't just about you anymore. It's about everyone who has ever felt marginalized or unheard, every silent voice that has been overshadowed by fear." The crowd leaned in, their expressions a mixture of concern and hope. His heart raced. "What do you mean?" James asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Michael took a deep breath, drawing strength from the people around them. "I saw the whole thing that night. It's enough to open the eyes of even the most stubborn." He glanced towards the shadows where the loud voice had come from. "You won't just fight for your truth, you'll fight for all of us who've been dismissed." A flicker of recognition ignited in the crowd. Was this what they needed to unite? Was this the raw truth that could begin a meaningful conversation about race and injustice? The air thickened with anticipation, each face reflecting their shared history. "What happened that night wasn't just an incident, James," Michael continued. "It was a culmination of years of fear, resentment, and misunderstanding. When the attack happened, it wasn't just a personal choice being made, it was a societal one." The renewed murmurs of the crowd buzzed softly, like the rustle of leaves in the breeze. James's mind raced through memories, the pain of that night flooding back into focus. But this was his moment, not to dwell on the past but to reshape the narrative. "Maybe it's time to tell them everything," James said, feeling an unexpected surge of courage. "Everything that night meant to me, to you, to us." He looked at Michael, whose face had softened, revealing the vulnerability underneath that tough exterior. The brothers stood united, a bond rekindling at a moment when the world needed it most. I want to talk about the fear I felt. The isolation. The feeling of being trapped in someone else's version of me. They think they see the whole picture, but they see only snippets, James pushed, his voice gaining momentum. I want that fear to transform into something different. Something powerful. The crowd breathed in, visibly moved, as if they shared in his revelation. I want us to heal. I want healing not just from me, but for anyone who has ever been pushed to the margins. Another voice broke free from the crowd, a woman stepping forward, hand raised. You're giving us a voice, James. I want to share my story too. No more silence. Echoed another. James felt his heart swell. Each voice that came forth transformed a weight he hadn't known he'd carried into a shared burden, and together they began to lighten it. The power of storytelling ignited hope, stripping away prejudices piece by piece, but just as momentum surged, the shadows stirred again. A figure stepped forward, eyes hardened, eyes locked onto James. You think this will change anything? The voice sneered. You'll never erase what you really are. The tension swelled, sharp as a knife. James's chest tightened, doubt creeping in again. Could hope exist with hate pressing from the fringes? It was a moment poised on the edge of possibility. Maybe it's not just about changing minds, he thought, feeling the weight of the crowd, of Michael, of himself. Maybe it's about creating a new vision altogether. The air shimmered with tension as James spoke again, steadier this time. Then let us talk. Let us talk about all of it. Let us bring everything into the light. And just then, a ringing cell phone broke through the emotional fray. It was Ellen, panic flaring in her eyes. They're coming, James. The police have arrived. A wave of dread washed over him. What did this mean for the gathering? Would it shatter everything they'd built in those moments of truth? What awaited them beyond the walls of that gathering? Fear rippled through the crowd at Ellen's words. It wasn't just panic, it was a sense of impending doom that hung heavy in the air. James felt a knot tighten in his stomach, his heart drumming wildly against his ribs. For a moment, his vision blurred with worry. What would happen if the police arrived? What kind of chaos would ensue? Everyone. We need to stay calm. Michael's voice cut through the anxiety, his command unyielding. This is our moment. We can't let fear undermine us. James nodded, catching Michael's intensity. Right. We can't just fall apart now. Not when we're finally starting to be heard. But the shadows of doubt lingered, swirling like clouds threatening a storm. As the crowd continued to murmur, he could see faces reflecting determination and fear all at once. James stepped forward again, shouting above the clamor. Listen. We can control this. We've gathered here for change. The police showing up isn't an end to our message, it's an opportunity to show them what we stand for. A loud voice broke through. But they only see us as troublemakers. They don't care about our stories. James's eyes darted around, searching for a solution. Then let us give them something they can't ignore. He could feel adrenaline coursing through him, igniting every nerve. We speak truth. We demonstrate our strength. If we show them our unity, they'll have to see us truly see us. The crowd hesitated, but a woman at the front, her voice trembling yet fierce, stepped forward. I will not be silent anymore. I will tell them that we're not just statistics. We're human. James felt a rush of hope. One voice led to another, and soon stories flowed from the crowd like a powerful tide. They were tales of pain, yet also of resilience, their voices blending into a harmonious narrative of possibility. But then, another figure emerged from the crowd. It was the same person who had stepped forward earlier, the one with hardened eyes. You really think sharing stories will change anything? You're just buying time until they silence you. A collective shudder ran through the audience. James swallowed hard. Let them come. We have nothing to hide. We're not just reactions to their hatred. We are living, breathing stories that demand to be acknowledged. A murmur of agreement swept through the crowd. Suddenly, a loud siren blared outside, cutting through the tension like a knife. They were close. James could hear boots crunching on gravel, voices raised in authoritative commands. Ellen clasped her hands nervously, her eyes darting to the door. "James, what are we going to do?" "They won't understand." "We'll make them understand," Michael said, stepping to James's side, the resolve in his voice settling over them like a protective shield. "We're not going to back down." As the front door swung open, revealing a group of police officers, their uniforms stark against the fading daylight, James inhaled deeply. "Let us stand together," James shouted, feeling the surge of energy ripple through each heart around him. "Let them witness who we are." With every breath, he felt the call to unity strengthen. Together they stood, not as victims but as a community demanding justice. But as the officers moved closer, their expressions unreadable, James realized there was more at stake than just words. Uncertainty loomed like darkness. What would the police response bring? In that moment of anticipation, James couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The weight of what lay ahead pressed against him, a palpable mix of fear and fierce resolve. Would they break under the pressure, or secure the change they so desperately sought? As the officers approached, serious faces studying the crowd, a single question hovered in the air: would they truly listen? James felt the ground beneath him shift as the police officers stepped inside. The air turned thick with tension, a tangible energy that held everyone in place. The uncertainty of what would come next loomed overhead like dark storm clouds. The lead officer, a stocky man with a hardened jaw, scanned the crowd. His eyes landed on James first, and for a brief moment, their gazes locked. In that heartbeat, James could feel the weight of every personal story, every struggle that had brought them here. Would this officer see the humanity in them, or would he just see a mob to be controlled? "Step aside," the officer barked, his voice piercing through the collective hush. "You need to disperse." James swallowed hard, his heart racing. "We're not going anywhere," he shouted back, surprising even himself. "We are not just going to shrink in the face of fear. We are here to be seen and heard." The crowd erupted into murmurs of agreement. "Yes," they called, their voices rising in a swell of solidarity. For James, it felt like the ground had shifted slightly beneath his feet, giving him some newfound confidence. They were united, and together they could withstand anything. The officer frowned, taking a calculated step forward. "You need to understand that your gathering is illegal. We won't tolerate any form of dissent." Dissent. The word hung in the air, echoing through the crowd. It felt like a punch to the gut. But it spurred something awake in James. "We've tolerated too much for too long," he yelled, his voice carrying now with passion. "This isn't about rebellion. This is about justice. This is about our right to exist." The lead officer glanced back at his colleagues, as if searching for support. But the rest of the officers still stood back, uncertain. James could see the flicker of hesitation in their eyes. Perhaps they didn't all share the same hardened perspective, and then, from somewhere near the back of the crowd, a woman stepped forward. Her eyes sparkled with unshed tears yet brimmed with fierce determination. "I'm not afraid of labels anymore. I'm tired of being silenced." Her words ignited a chain reaction. One by one, people began stepping up, sharing their stories, tales filled with pain, strength, and the undeniable resilience that lay behind every personal battle. It transformed into a chorus, a powerful anthem of voices all intertwined for a single purpose: to demand humanity. James's heart swelled each time someone took that step. The fear started to dissipate, replaced by a rising tide of courage. "Keep going," he encouraged, as more and more faces emerged to share their truths. But then, the lead officer's face hardened. "Last warning. Disperse now, or we'll take action." Panic surged again. The crowd shifted uneasily. James looked at his friends, at the determined faces standing beside him. They couldn't let a threat silence them now. No. He shouted, his voice a clarion call. We're not done. We won't be silenced today. As if fueled by his command, the crowd surged forward, creating a wall of humanity that was both beautiful and terrifying. Each heartbeat echoed an unyielding spirit. They were refusing to retreat. The officers felt it too, a pulse in the air, a shift in the dynamics, but just as urgency reached its peak, another sound erupted from behind the line of officers, startling everyone into silence. A woman's voice, fierce and unmistakable, rang out. Let the people speak. In that moment, the crowd turned as one, faces shifting from anxiety to a glimmer of hope. Who was this woman? Anger sparked, but so did curiosity. Had someone in authority finally decided to step up against the tide? Would this be the voice that bridged the gap between them and the enforcers of silence? The question hung in the air, electric. What would happen next? The woman's voice sliced through the charged atmosphere, carrying with it a weight of authority that was hard to ignore. She pushed forward, stepping from behind the officers like a beacon in the dark. Her short, cropped hair reflected the streetlights overhead, and her sharp, determined gaze made it clear she intended to bring something important to light. Listen to them. She implored, lifting her hands slightly, almost like a conductor preparing for the symphony to rise again. What these people have to say matters. It's time to stop silencing voices that deserve to be heard. The lead officer's brow furrowed, caught off guard by her boldness. This is not how these gatherings work, he shot back, the tension in his voice betraying his irritation. But the crowd wasn't backing down. They leaned in closer, eager for what this woman might say next. I know you believe you're here to keep the peace, she continued, unwavering. But what peace can exist when voices are muffled? Our community is full of stories, aching to be respected and understood. Don't you want to hear them? James watched as the officer hesitated, a crack forming in his earlier fortitude. The room was alive with murmurs, some filled with hope, others with anxiety. Everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Why should we listen to them? He grunted, crossing his arms defensively. You don't get to break the law because you feel entitled to say whatever you want. But James' heart raced as the woman took a step closer, the crowd parting like the Red Sea behind her. Breaking the law? She echoed, disbelief mingling with sincerity. What about the law we all share as human beings? The law that says we deserve dignity? You think your badge makes you invulnerable, but remember it also requires you to protect the rights of everyone. Each word seemed to resonate with the crowd, a chorus of shared sentiments swelling in their hearts. James felt like he could almost taste the moment, the electricity in the air, the fleeting spark of change. Let us talk, one elderly man called out from the back, slipping through people until he stood boldly in front of the officers. I fought for justice in my youth. I see the same struggle here. Let us hear each other. A domino effect began. More voices joined him, rising higher in volume and strength. Civil rights. Someone shouted. Equality. Another echoed. The crowd poured out their anger mixed with hope, reclaiming their right to speak. James glanced at the officer's eyes, still narrowed fiercely, but now there was a flicker of uncertainty. The woman turned back toward him. You're not alone, she reassured gently, studying him intently. We all feel the weight of our struggles. But standing divided won't get us anywhere. We can change this together. Suddenly, her gaze shifted back to the officers, who still stood frozen like statues. Will you stand with us, or will you silence us? The question lingered, heavy and real. As moments stretched painfully into silence, uncertainty cloaked the scene like a thick fog. James's heart thumped loudly within him. What would the officers decide? Would this assembly break apart or stand firm under the pressure of authority? Each second felt like an eternity, the tension razor thin. And just when he thought a decision might emerge, a loud crash broke through the night. A figure stumbled from a nearby alley, breathless and frenzied. "It's happening!" they gasped, eyes wild with terror. "You have to see this." The crowd turned in a frenzied whirlwind, some pulling away from authority, others drawn to the potential discovery. What could it mean? James's mind raced. Who was this new arrival, and what did they bring? The uncertainty heightened, drawing them all together in a moment that promised change or chaos. What was happening now? Would this shift everything he stood for? The crowd awaited the revelation, and so did he. The figure from the alley staggered into the light, and it was as if time itself paused. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, the tension morphing into a pulse of anxious energy. An electric fear coursed through James. This wasn't just a distraction, it was a warning. "What is going on?" someone shouted, urgency painting their words. The newcomer, a young woman, clutched a crumpled phone, her fingers trembling as she tried to catch her breath. "There's a video, you have to see it. It's all on social media right now." James blinked as the realization settled in. Social media. The platform that spread truths and lies alike. Was this something that could change everything? Could it expose that which had been hidden in the shadows? A sense of dread mixed with intrigue took hold of him as he became a spectator to the unfolding drama. "Show us," demanded the woman who had stood up to the officers, a fierce determination in her voice that awakened something deep inside him. They wanted answers, and it felt as if change were brewing just out of reach. The young woman held her phone up, her voice growing steadier. "It was just a few blocks from here. The police were chasing someone who didn't have to be pursued like that," and then her breath hitched, the weight of what she was about to reveal staggering. Then things got out of hand. A ripple of murmurs passed through the crowd, the apprehension causing walls to break down. No longer were they just a gathering of individuals, they had become a collective heartbeat. "We have to see what happened," James urged, a spark of determination igniting within him as he stepped closer. The young woman navigated to a post on her phone, her fingers moving with urgency. As she thrust the screen toward the crowd, faces angled in closer, curiosity and fear mingling within them. It was grainy footage, shaky but compelling. Police officers were seen confronting a man who appeared frightened. Voices raised, confusion swirling like a storm. Then, suddenly, it erupted, a confrontation that escalated fast. Shadows moved, bodies collided, and then came the horrible sound of shouting mingling with cries for help. James's heart sank. This was not just another story, this was a testament to a living nightmare anyone could face. Anger simmered beneath the surface, but so did disbelief. Where was the accountability? How had it come to this? A group of young adults near the front reacted sharply, indignation etched into their features. "This is wrong. This is what we're fighting against." Their voices rang out, rallying the crowd like a battle cry. The lead officer had shifted, his gaze glued to the screen, genuine concern threading through his tough exterior. He looked like a man who had just awoken from a dormant state, faced with a truth too harsh to ignore. "Stop this!" he barked suddenly, but the words came out more like a plea than a command. "We want," came the unyielding response from the crowd. They stood resolute, united by a call for justice that echoed through the night. James felt his pulse quicken. This was a defining moment the kind people spoke of for years. They deserved to be heard. He shouted, feeling the tide shift in his own heart. All of these voices matter. We can't look away now. As more people crowded around the phone, expressions turned fierce, passionate. The raw emotions poured forth like a river breaking free from a dam, and James realized he wasn't alone. Each voice around him resonated with a fierce urgency, a deep-seated yearning for recognition and change. A crackle of uncertainty still loomed in the air, and yet hope gleamed amid the turmoil. Would this revelation stir the officers awake to join their fight? The crowd stirred, conversations igniting, and an unexpected sense of momentum filled the air. "We need to go there, to confront this together," Someone shouted, the idea rippling through group like wildfire. James felt both exhilarated and terrified. Would they march for truth? For justice? As the rallying cry grew louder, he glanced back at the officers, their fate hanging delicately in the balance. Would they follow the crowd? Or would they retreat into silence? Everything felt precariously poised at that moment. Decisions lay ahead that could either unite or fracture them all further. What would James choose? Would he join the tide of change, or would fear pull him back into the shadows he'd always known? The desire to act hung thick in the air, and the crowd's energy surged like a wave crashing toward the shore. James looked around, catching the fire in the eyes of his neighbors. The frustration, the determination, it was palpable. These were people who had found their voices, and they were no longer willing to be silenced. "Let us go," shouted the woman beside him, her fists clenched and raised high. "We need to get to the scene now." James's heart raced. The time for hesitation was over. He felt a magnetic pull toward the truth, a sense of duty entwined with the fear gnawing at his insides. Behind the gathered officers, the street sat shrouded in shadows, and he imagined the horror that had unfolded there just moments before. "Are you with us?" the young woman asked, her resolve unwavering. It was clear she wouldn't take no for an answer, and James found himself nodding, caught in her whirlwind of passion. "Yeah, I'm in," he said, the words barely escaping his lips before they surged forward, legs pumping on the pavement, adrenaline propelling him. The crowd began to move, a living serpent of humanity winding towards the scene. With every step, the initial trepidation morphed into something more potent, hope fused with anger. Each face was set in grim determination. They were tired of injustice, tired of being overlooked. As they approached the site of the incident, the city neighborhood came into view. Scattered glass glinted under flickering streetlights, and the air was thick with tension. Shouts from officers mixed with the low, troubled murmurs of onlookers. James felt a chill creep up his spine, a knot forming in his stomach. "What do we do now?" someone yelled from the back of the crowd, anxiety creeping into the voices around him. The air was electrified with fear as they realized the potential for confrontation. James stopped in his tracks, feeling a surge of responsibility crash over him. "We show them they can't intimidate us anymore," he shouted, his voice threading through the throng, carrying a weight he didn't entirely understand. "We're here for justice." His words ignited another wave of determination through the multitude. People began to chant, a rhythm forming, a primal declaration of their resolve. "Justice! Justice! Justice!" Ahead, the police officers exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering in their eyes, some steeling themselves, while others appeared conflicted. The lead officer had stepped forward, and for a moment, it felt like the world could break in either direction. James moved closer, the swarm nudging him forward. With each inch, he felt the collective heartbeat of their cause. They demanded accountability, and somehow, they seemed to channel a weighty history, the fight for truth echoing alongside their present courage. Yet, a voice of doubt whispered within him, keeping him grounded. What if this escalated? What if they were made to pay for speaking out? He looked to the side, catching a glimpse of the young woman who sparked this movement. Her resolve mirrored urgency, a fire in her eyes that he wanted to embody. Just as fear began to rear its head, a small child's cry broke through the chaos. James turned toward the sound, and in that instant, a realization hit him. This wasn't just about him or the people around him. They were advocating for future generations, a stand against the shadows that threatened to dominate. In that moment, he felt clarity seeping into his bones. They weren't just marching for justice today, they were paving a path for tomorrow. "Together, we can change this," he called out, his voice clear and ringing. "Let us not turn back." And as they moved forward, the crowd's momentum built into a tidal wave, gaining energy from the hope pulsing through their ranks. But just then, something unexpected happened. A loud crash echoed behind them, shattering the charged atmosphere like glass. James turned, his heart plummeting. What would they face now? The noise pulled his attention back to the officers, who were suddenly on high alert. Remain calm. One shouted, but the warning hung in the air. Ripe with tension, James took a deep breath, feeling the collective fear thrumming around him. They had come for change, but what awaited them? Would they find solidarity or chaos? In that pivotal moment, everything teetered on the edge. How would they respond when faced with the consequences of their stand? The resolution loomed like a shadow, and he couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was only beginning. The silence that followed the crash hung heavy, as if the world itself had stopped to watch. James felt the crowd around him tense, bodies stiffening with uncertainty. The chant for justice sputtered, replaced by a collective intake of breath. He turned back toward the officers, seeking answers amidst their frantic movements. "Get back! Move back!" someone shouted. The tension crackled like static in the air. Officers were forming a line, shields raised, eyes scanning the crowd. James's heart raced as he realized the possibility of violence was now tangible, hovering like storm clouds overhead. "What is happening?" a voice cried out. Panic laced the question, reflecting what many were feeling. The young woman beside James looked at him, her eyes wide, displaying a mix of fear and resolve. "Don't let them push us back," he urged, the words barely his own. "This is our moment. We can't back down now." The crowd hesitated, minds racing with the implications. James could see it in their faces, a mix of indignation and fear, a battle between the desire to fight and the instinct to flee. He squeezed the young woman's hand, a silent promise that they wouldn't go down without a fight. Then, just as doubt threatened to sweep through the body of the crowd, a familiar voice broke through. "You know why we're here. We are not just numbers or statistics. We are families, we are community. We're here to stand up, not to back down." A middle-aged man stepped forward, his fists clenched, determination radiating from him. The crowd began to respond, murmurs of agreement growing louder. "Yes. Yes." James felt a surge of hope. Maybe all wasn't lost. Striking a match in the darkness, the man's words lit a fire. People echoed back in unison, "We are here. We will not be silenced." But the officers were still moving, and it was clear they were preparing to disperse the crowd. Tension constricted in James's throat. "We have to show them we mean business," he shouted. "Let them see how many of us are ready to stand for change. Together." Someone cried from the back, and the chant started again, swelling like a tide. "Together. Together. Together." The police formed a solid wall, but as the crowd pressed on, they began to feel the pressure. Hushed whispers bounced among the officers, fear mingled with their newfound resolve. James could see it, some of them were uncertain, questioning. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he caught movement. A woman rushed past him, darting toward the police line with something in her hand. "Stop!" an officer shouted, stepping forward. "Get back!" But the woman wouldn't back down. She held up a sign that read, "Black Lives Matter." In bold letters. "We will not be afraid anymore," she cried, loudly, defiantly. In that moment, everyone fell silent, eyes glued to her and the message she carried. The impact was electric. The chant faltered but quickly rallied behind her. "We will not be afraid. We will not back down." She joined the front lines, a fierce embodiment of the spirit driving this movement. James's heart pounded as he watched the scene unfold. They were at a tipping point, the atmosphere thick with emotion, hope, fear, anger, and a fierce desire for justice swirling together. Their voices were rising now, echoing through the chaotic night. Then came the moment that felt like the climax of a thunderstorm, when things change irrevocably. An officer was stepping forward toward the woman with the sign, tension crackling as another voice called out to him, "Wait. What do you really stand for?" The crowd held its breath, a wave of anticipation sweeping through. James clenched his fists, uncertainty gripped him as he realized they were about to find out what lay beneath the chaos, would the officer uphold the law or recognize the humanity in front of him? The answer was pivotal, the crowds teetering on the edge of something monumental. What would the response reveal about their fight? The officer paused, the weight of the moment pressing down like a thick fog. All eyes were on him, the question hanging in the air, potent and electric. He took a breath, exhaling slowly, his gaze flickering to the woman with the sign. As she raised it higher, the crowd surged, hands clenching into fists, ready for whatever might come next. What do I stand for? He echoed, his voice strangely vulnerable against the roaring voices of the crowd. I stand for justice. I stand for the people. A murmur cascaded through the crowd, the collective uncertainty morphing into something hopeful. Then you have to listen to us. The woman shouted, her voice piercing through the murmur. You can't turn your back on what's happening here. The officer nodded slowly, his hardened facade beginning to crack. He looked at his colleagues, the uncertainty flickering between them. The expressions on the faces around him shifted, this wasn't just a mob anymore. They were people with stories, families, connections. He could no longer dismiss them as a unified threat. We're here because we want change. James yelled, stepping forward. We need to heal together, but you have to see us first. His heart thudded loudly, every beat echoing the urgency of the moment, the desperate need for connection. And then, the officer blinked, genuinely weighing the choice before him. So, what do you propose? He asked, his voice now softer, questioning but open. James felt the air shift. This was the opening they needed, a bridge of understanding. We share our stories. We want to be heard, respected, and understood. That night what happened to me, it's just one piece of a larger puzzle. His voice rang with the connection to every person there, weaving a narrative of shared humanity that reached deep into every heart. Then let us hear it. The officer exclaimed, crossing his arms in defiance, but the tension was easing, the atmosphere shifting from confrontation to something akin to dialogue. Behind them, the crowd erupted into cheers. Let us share. Who wants to speak? Someone shouted. James watched as hands raised amidst excitement, a wave of people now eager to share their stories. One after another, they stepped forward, neighbors, friends, strangers alike, pouring out their truths, their fears, their hopes. That a middle-aged woman spoke of her son, lost to the system. I'm here because my child deserves a future, she said, tears shimmering like morning dew. Another shared about their own fear, a banker who was once a teen peering down the path of anger and misunderstanding. Slowly but surely, the crowd around James transformed from anxious onlookers to a community shifted by shared voices, an orchestra of stories creating harmony out of chaos. The officer, despite his initial reluctance, began to nod as they spoke, truly listening, humanity shining through the authoritative veil, and as they shared, something beautiful happened. The officers shifted, their hardened stances relaxing into something approaching empathy. The lead officer locked eyes with James, a mutual recognition dawning. James felt hope settle into his chest. We can't continue this cycle of fear. He called out, igniting the crowd again. We can break this together. They erupted into applause, voices mingling into something transcendent. Unity manifested in the simplicity of truth. Real conversations could reshape destinies. As night turned to dawn, the air cleared, and the cycle of hostility began to give way to a shared understanding. The voices had done what they intended. They sparked change, dialogue, connection. The groups began to merge, the police officers now side by side with community members, seeking clarity on how they could move forward, not as factions but as one cohesive unit. James's heart swelled, his brother's hand on his shoulder grounding him. Ellen stood nearby, tears of pride glimmering in her eyes. Together they witnessed the transformation that needed to happen. Let us not forget this moment, the lead officer said, raising his voice as the crowd began to settle, the buzzing energy slowly fading into a soft hum. We have a long way to go, but it starts here. Hope lingered in the air, steady like the first rays of dawn breaking through the horizon. The people cheered, reaffirming their commitment to continue the conversation, to demand change, and to stand united. This was the moment they had waited for, the dawning of a new era, and as they stood together, hand in hand, they realized change had already begun. Together, they vowed to carry it forward. Now, as this inspiring transformation wraps up, I need you to act. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help spread these messages of hope. Comment below your reactions and feelings about this powerful ending. We want to hear from you. And don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions, so let's show what we're capable of together.